Good morning. I want to welcome everybody to this quick webinar. I want to take some time to walk you through verbally the changes made to the handbook this past April at the executive committee meeting. Of course, we had two different avenues this year, and we're going to go through those avenues and how they took place and just kind of walk you through it. All this information was sent to you in writing for you to share down with your coaches back in April. And of course, we'll share all the changes with our coaches through the rules clinics. And again, with our administrators at the mandatory administrators meetings later this month or later in July. So multiple opportunities for everybody to hear it. Just wanted to get it out in front of you again before we flip the calendar over to July 1 and these changes take place so that we don't have any violations, but everybody knows what the new rules and regulations changes would be moving forward. At any point in time, if you've got a question, just hit the chat button at your bottom of your screen down there. Ask away. Amy will be helping me monitor that chat. And of course, if something comes to your mind after we're done, then we will be able to answer your phone calls as they come in as needed. So with that, I want to take you through our handbook changes for this year moving forward. So we had two different avenues this year for our handbook changes. The first was the handbook review committee. And then the second was our traditional way of making changes to the rules and regulations, which was a proposal to the activity subcommittee of the executive committee. Please note that the handbook review committee was only for this past year. It was part of an executive committee goal to review the entire league handbook. And the review this year we're focusing on the review of the rules and regulations. So your handbook review committee, the process for this committee, the committee was 18 persons that included a chair. Consisted of athletic directors and coaches representing the sports that they coached or sports they have coached, as well as they represented each classification and geographical region. Additionally, we had representation from all genders and minorities across our great association in building this committee. We had coaches who were very seasoned and coaches who had been involved for less than a decade in their sport as well. So that group was charged with reviewing the entire rules and regulations. Everything was open to them to review and to get feedback on through the process. The committee met for the first time in person in early September, and they divided the handbook into sections for their review to be able to make the task a little bit easier on them throughout the process. Committee members then met again in person 2 more times throughout the year, and then again on Zoom, according to the chair, who the chair was Coach Tommy Bell, who's the athletic director at TL Hanna High School. He told me they met on Zoom probably approximately somewhere around 30 to 40 different times to continue that discussion further. That committee, the feedback for that committee, the committee was responsible for soliciting feedback from their respective coaches associations throughout the process. So if they were coaching a sport or they were responsible for the oversight of a sport through this process, they were responsible for getting feedback from their respective coaches association on any rule changes that could impact that sport particularly. Schools were given an opportunity for feedback. Principals and athletic directors were made potential recommendations throughout the process to provide feedback to the committee. And this information was sent to each classification president to be sent down throughout the classification. So, and then based on that feedback throughout the process, they made changes to the final document that were shared with schools in January for further detailed discussion at the meetings in Charleston. Understand that the feedback was given to the schools and to the coaches associations throughout the process to help this group navigate their way through any possible changes or recommended changes to the rules and regulations. And again, they got down to a final, what they felt like was a very good working document. Of course, along the way, they had conversations with our office and the commissioner about some potential changes and what conflicts that could have, or what challenges they could bring. And we just gave feedback on those things along the way as well. And then everybody had a chance to have a voice to this process based on the way this committee worked. The process for approval, once all the proposed changes were presented to the league staff then took this to the activities subcommittee of the executive committee for modification, recommendation, or not recommended to the full committee. So the activities subcommittee got the full recommendations from this committee, and then that committee had the ability to modify or that committee had the ability to modify, recommend or not recommend to the executive committee. These recommendations were made to the full committee on each potential change. And then the executive committee finally had the final decision on any modification, approval, or denying any proposed changes. So that's kind of the process for how we got to the changes. I know once these were announced and put out, we've received a number of phone calls from schools and or from coaches who want to know how or why. There's the how or why through the handbook review committee. And now we're going to walk you through some of these changes. The first change was the committee felt like that we have a definition for what is in season, what is a definition of open season, what's the definition for closed season, but really felt like we don't have a written definition of what the preseason is. And the preseason, again, is that period of time that is 10 days prior to the first legal playing date. And during this time, contests can be played, but must be done so in the form of a tournament, and they count towards the season limit of games or dates for that sport. So this is nothing new. This is just actually putting into words what the definition of a preseason would be. Amy, at this time, do we have any questions on anything we've covered so far?
No, we do not have any questions.
Okay. The next change the handbook review committee made was to the open season changes. And please note that we've got a lot of coaches that have called and said, hey, why the change? We used to have, spring sports, for example, we used to have from December 5th or 6th all the way through January 25 or 26. Why the change? Please note, this is an additional period. This is in addition to what they had before. If you also note, before they had 20 days of practice during that open period. Now they have the entire period. So if you include Saturdays and Sundays, you potentially have 30 or 31 day periods to work with your student athletes outside of your sports season. When you add your sports season and the summer months into it, you're really only looking at about a 2 or 2.5 month window throughout the year where you can't physically work with your student athletes. Fall sports will have March 31st through 31st. They'll also have May 1 through 31 as well. Winter sports will have September 1 through 30, and then also April 1 through 30 as well. And then spring sports will have all of October. And again, they'll have a January 1 through 25 period. And of course, they'll shut down those 4 days prior to their season starting at the end of January, 1st of February. Some notes for you. Competitive cheer. Competitive cheer can hold their tryouts in May. In the past, competitive cheer had that window of April and May for their 20 dates to hold their tryouts in. But their window now for tryouts is all of May. So competitive cheer would have practice March 1 through 31 and prepare everybody for what tryouts may look like. And then you can have tryouts May 1 through 31 during that time. Football, your 10 days in pads will remain the same in May. And of course, that's after 3 days in helmets only. And lacrosse, your goalies can wear full gear during open season. This is a big change for lacrosse. In the past, goalies have not been allowed to wear full gear until the teams could wear full gear. But now during both open periods in October and January, the goalies can wear their open periods or their full gear as well. And in boys lacrosse during the January period, the first 5 days are in helmets only. After that, they can get into the full gear for the remaining 20 days. And we've got a question, Amy.
No, it was not a question.
Okay. Okay, outside teams competition. This was a change made to what was called the 75% rule. So the name has been changed. We'll no longer refer to it as the 75% rule. So if you call up here and say, hey, I got a question about the 75% rule, we're going to correct you and say, you got a question about the allowable starters rule. And of course, the maximum number here was 15. The committee felt like 15 was a good max number for any sport. And it really only impacts possibly 4 sports that might exceed the 15. Of course, competitive cheer starts on the mat with 24. And in swimming and track, you could always argue that you've got way more than 15 starters, but they felt like 15 would be the max number. All other sports, you actually have the ability to coach on an outside team the number of athletes that would physically start your contest on the very first play, not the number of starters you would use for the contest, the ones that would physically start on the very first play of the contest. Note, all sports were given an increase in numbers. Nobody lost numbers here. Swim, competitive cheer, and track, they stayed the same. Everybody else had an increase in numbers. And again, this number applies to students on an outside team coached by a coach from your school. And these numbers apply to students who were listed on eligibility and dressed for a contest at the varsity level during the previous season. It does not impact those that only played sub-varsity or middle school sports. Those that dress for a varsity contest and are playing on an outside team for a coach from your school, this number would apply to them. And remember, this number applies to not only contests, but also to practices as well for that outside team. And remember, the coach is tied to this number of athletes. Any questions on the outside team or competition?
We don't have any questions. Yeah, we're good.
Okay, scrimmages. There was a change, as you remembered, I think 2 years ago, there was a change to the scrimmage allotment for each level. Varsity teams had 2 scrimmages and 1 jamboree. Sub-varsity teams had 1 scrimmage and 1 jamboree. Now the change was made. This committee felt like that a jamboree is not a viable option for a lot of sports, that there are a number of sports that a jamboree is essentially, it's not worth the time it takes to get set up and get there and participate. So the option exists now that a school, a team can trade their 1 jamboree in for a 3rd scrimmage. So varsity teams, excuse me, varsity teams would have 2 scrimmages and 1 jamboree, or they would have 3 scrimmages. Sub-varsity teams would have 1 scrimmage and 1 jamboree, or they would have 2 scrimmages. There is no opportunity to add an additional jamboree. For example, we only want to do 1 scrimmage and 2 jamborees. It's not an option. You max out at 1 jamboree, and if you choose to do the jamboree as a varsity team, you max out at 2 scrimmages. So you have an option now, 2 and 1 or 3 scrimmages at the varsity level, and that is for all sports. Any questions on the scrimmages or jamborees?
We're good.
The Handbook Review Committee also updated some language. In the past, competitive cheer coaches were recommended to take a cheer and dance safety course. The title of that course had changed over the years in the process of updating the title of that course. And then, of course, it was recommended by the executive committee that this course now, instead of go from being recommended, it moved to being required. And of course, this is the cheer and dance safety course through the NFHSlearn.org. So the Handbook Review Committee recommended the name change, and the executive committee recommended that it become required for all cheer head coaches for the competitive cheer teams. Of course, this is good for 4 years. So this certification is good for 4 years. They only have to do it one time every 4-year period. In the football section, the Handbook Review Committee recommended a change to the wording that strongly advised that schools provide a hotel room for football game officials. That language was changed. That says now that schools need to provide facilities for football game officials to dress that are sanitary, secure, and include chairs, showers, and hot water. Obviously, if you do not have that facility on site at your stadium, you're going to need to make arrangements for where that off-site place needs to be, whether it be at a school building nearby, at a church, or at a hotel that you provide. But we've taken out the language that a hotel is strongly advised. You make the decision on what you need to do to meet the requirements for your football game officials. In the wrestling section, when they were looking at individual sports coming under the wrestling section, letter Q was changed. The procedures for weigh-ins, we've had some issues over the last probably 3 to 4 years with some weigh-ins, specifically when we get to the postseason. And in consultation with the Wrestling Coaches Association and this committee, they kind of really felt like this could clean up some issues we've had. Coaches will have the 2 data weigh-in sheets, one for the visiting team and one for the home team. Each coach will be responsible for recording the actual weights. Once the official calls the weight out, each coach will record the weight for both athletes. After weigh-ins, the head coaches will show their sheets to each other and ensure there are no discrepancies, and they will sign off on both sheets, and that will become official once the official signs off on it for either the dual match that's taking place after the weigh-ins or the tournament. So basically, each coach will record the called out weights for every athlete that steps on for both teams. They'll then match up what they both have written down and ensure that it is accurate, and then they'll all sign off on it with the official, and that will be the final document. They added the letter R to that. The official is no longer going to be required to record that information. They'll actually just be the ones that are announcing the weights. And of course, if there is a discrepancy on those sheets, the official will be the one that mediates that at that time. Another change made through the Handbook Review Committee was to health and safety. It was recommended that the league website be a spot where we can house on a one-click link all of our health and safety information. Of course, everything that is required will remain in the rules and regulations, but all of our health and safety information, some stuff that was just supplemental information, and everything that is required, it was recommended that we put that one easy to find spot on our website and not have it in several different places throughout. And then track and field, there was new updated language in the handbook reflecting recent changes to the state track meet series. If you remember, the state track meet series increased the number of athletes participating, and the updated language in the handbook will now reflect that and the qualifying process. Any questions so far, Amy, that I need to address?
No, we're good.
Okay, our next group of changes were made through the Activities Committee. This is the traditional process for making changes to the rules and regulations, and the only process moving forward. So that process, how it works, is a proposal. A proposed change or addition is made by either a school or a district, a coaches association, or league staff to the Activities Committee. The school or the district, that proposal should come from either the principal or the superintendent. And if it's a coaches association proposal, it should come from the president of that sports coaches association on behalf of the entire coaches association. Feedback for this proposal: the author or authors, they should receive feedback from the classifications. And this is typically done either at the classification meetings when they meet throughout the year, or at the spring conference in Charleston. And this gives the classifications an opportunity to have discussion on these items or on your proposed change, as well as give feedback, hopefully through a straw poll of the classification, so the classification representative knows how to vote on behalf of their classification at the executive committee meeting, or at least has some feeling for what the class thinks. If the proposal deals with a health and safety issue, or it impacts health and safety, then league staff, we will run this proposal through the South Carolina Medical Aspects of Sports Committee for their feedback from a medical perspective only. This committee is in place to provide the commissioner and or the executive committee feedback for any health and safety related issue as it pertains to our association and playing sports. So this group, they do not get in the business of rewriting or reworking a proposal. They just take the nuts and bolts of a proposal and tell us their medical feedback on it. Of course, the executive committee and or the commissioner can choose to utilize that feedback moving forward or ignore that feedback moving forward. But just know that if it's ignored, there is no medical backing for the decision that they're making. So after that, the process for approval, all proposed changes are then presented by the league staff to the activities subcommittee. That subcommittee again can modify. They can recommend that proposal as is, or they cannot recommend that proposal to the full executive committee. Understand that if they do not recommend it, it doesn't mean it's killed. The full executive committee can take it up as a non-recommended item and have discussion on it and then recommend it moving forward. Activity subcommittee makes those recommendations or modified changes or non-recommendations to the full executive committee on each change at the executive committee meeting. And then the executive committee takes a final vote on and either modifies what was proposed to them through activities. They either fully approve it or they deny any proposed changes. Of course, any communication of whether it is approved or denied is communicated back with the individual who wrote the proposal and submitted it to the league staff. So they are very well aware of whether their proposal passed or did not pass. Any questions, Amy?
No, we're still good.
Very good. So a couple of changes made through the traditional process of the activities committee. Proposal was from the league staff to insert into the cheer section of the rules and regulations that would address music being copyrighted as by what is required by law. Again, competitive cheer for years has been utilizing music that they're cutting into their routines that we did not require to be copyrighted. And however, to comply with federal copyright laws, we have now updated our language that requires competitive cheer teams to have their performance music license, and they'll be required to do that before they participate in the state qualifier. Thought process is there. You're going to have that music throughout the year to practice, to do your routines and all your competitions, and that you'll have it licensed before you start competing all year, but it will be required. And that proof of purchase will need to be uploaded to the website for intent to participate form for the state qualifier. And of course, you can find music providers at the link here on the screen. There was a proposal from the South Carolina Basketball Coaches Association that allowed for the use of the shot clock in invitationals and showcase events that choose to use it. This proposal passed. Schools will be allowed now to choose to use a shot clock during any invitational. This includes tournaments or showcase that they host. Shot clock may not be used outside of these events during the regular season or postseason play. So if a school is going to host a tournament or an invitational, either preseason or during the season, you can choose to utilize a shot clock. You just need to make sure that you notify all participants prior to committing that you're going to be using a shot clock. This would be for both boys and girls. And you can use that shot clock in your event in our state beginning this basketball season. If you've got a single regular season game or a region game, or a game that's outside of a tournament or showcase, then you will not be able to use a shot clock during those events. Of course, we will not be utilizing it in postseason play. And this approval was given and requested and given for the next 2 years. So for the next 2 years, this option is available to those in the basketball tournaments and or showcases. There was a proposal from the South Carolina Swim Coaches Association that adjusted the minimum consideration times. This would be for qualifying in the 3A and 4A state meets. The multiplier was changed from 1.10 to 1.14. The times, the consideration times were updated in the league handbook as well. And again, this is not going to add a new heat. This is going to help fill out heats in those events, because the last couple of years there have been some open lanes and some heats that were this group's just trying to find a way to be able to open the consideration times up to fill out those heats. This is not guaranteeing anybody to get in. These are for those that will be in consideration to also join. Proposal from the Football Coaches Association that would implement a mercy rule in varsity football. In football, a running clock will go into effect once a team is up by 42 or more points at halftime or at any time beyond halftime. And of course, we will get to our football coaches and officials the exact times that the clock will stop. This does not mean that once this team is up by 42 at the half that the clock will start and will never stop ever again for any reason. There will be points of time where it will stop. However, this is meant to kind of expedite the second half a little bit and to keep things moving. So it will be a very short half compared to what you are normally used to. Please keep in mind that once a team goes up by 42 points, if somebody's up 42-0 at the half and somebody reels off 28 straight points in the first 6 minutes of the third quarter, we will play with a running clock the remainder of the half. So once we start the running clock, it will stay a running clock for the remainder of the contest. Of course, in the past, coaches could mutually agree. This takes that mutual agreement out and just makes it a rule as to what will take place when this happens. And finally, there was a proposal from Spartanburg School District 6, Dorman High School specifically, to add boys volleyball to the fall season for the 22-23 school year. So beginning this fall, schools can offer boys volleyball as a league sanctioned sport. There will be no postseason play for 2022. And beginning in 22 or 23-24, the league will offer a state championship in boys volleyball, provided the sport meets the required number of schools participating to offer a championship. I know Amy's gotten a lot of calls, and we've gotten some calls here about, what's the season dates look like. This sport will mirror girls volleyball. What has been the traditionally referred to as girls volleyball, we will now refer to it as volleyball in South Carolina, because we will have boys and girls volleyball. Boys will start the same day as all fall sports. Their scrimmage date, their game opportunities to start playing games and preseason dates will be the same as the females. Please keep in mind, with this being a certified or a sanctioned sport now, head coaches will be required to attend a league sponsored rules meeting, and all athletes participating will have to go on eligibility and have all the necessary paperwork on file and meet eligibility requirements to be eligible to participate. So, and also certified officials will be used for all varsity contests. So we will operate this the same way as we've operated girls volleyball for decades now, with the one exception this year being there will not be a state championship this year, and that state championship will be offered moving forward beginning next year.
Okay, Charlie, you do have a question, shot clock for basketball. They want to know what it's going to be set for.
Shot clock for basketball will be 35 seconds. There is a reference in the basketball rules book from the NFHS. If you order one of those for your school, which highly encourage you to do so in all your sports, that began with the 21-22 season, which was this past year, there is a page in there that outlines the 35-second shot clock use. NFHS approved a shot clock for high school basketball for states that chose to do so by state association adoption. However, the parameters put on that was that it must be a 35-second shot clock, and they laid out the parameters for the use of that shot clock in the rules and regulations. So we will follow it exactly as in there for any tournaments or invitationals that sanction it and choose to use it.
All right, you have another question. It says, what are the limitations for March open season for football? And are they the same as the May period?
No, they're not the same. During March, actually during May, you have that opportunity to put on full pads after the first 3 days. You have up to 10 days in full gear during that open period in May. In March, you do not have that opportunity. You can wear no pads of any kind on the body, which would include girdles or pads in a girdle on the hip or below the waist as well. So no pads. Of course, helmets can be worn. It would be basically the same thing you're doing now in June and July during those open periods was what you'd be doing in March.
Okay, let's see. What can or can't be done July 4th week and the week of the clinic?
July 4th week is exactly what it's been the last couple of years. It is dead. That week, when the executive committee approved that 3 years ago to begin as a dead week, was designed to give not only our athletes, but also our coaches and administrators a week off. And basically, there is nobody at the school. If the coaches want to go up to the school and meet, that's your decision, but you cannot open it as even not required or encouraged or in any capacity for kids to come. So kids have to be told that week the building is shut down, the facility's shut down, don't come, we're not open. It's not even voluntary during that week. It is dead, nothing going on. It's meant to give everybody a week to just decompress before it all starts back up again in a few short weeks. The coaches clinic, of course, when that period shuts down for fall sports, those 4 days, it's just like any other closed period throughout the year. No sport specific activities can be taught or trained at the school with coaches and or athletes. You can, of course, condition and weight training just like you would in any other closed period. However, the dead week is a week unlike any other. There is no opportunity for anything, no meetings, no conversations, no face-to-face. Just keep it as it says, it's dead.
All right, and we had one question, and this just benefit the entire group. We have recorded this webinar, so it has been recorded. We will post it on our website. It'll be under the Rewind tab. So you'll be able to share this with your coaches. They can go there and view this information that was shared with you all today. So it has been recorded and will be shared on our website.
And as always, if you've got any further questions or something comes to your mind here in the next few days that you didn't think to ask today or you didn't want to ask today, feel free to give us a call here at the office. Please note that we'll be closed next week for the dead week, and many of the commissioners will be out of the office later part of this week at a national conference. However, we will be available via email and or phone throughout that time. So please feel free to give us a call at any point or shoot us an email and we'll get back to you as soon as we get it. Seeing no further questions, hope you all have a great end of June. It's amazing how fast time flies. We're almost done with June and into July, and before you know it, we'll be right back into the full mix of things here in about 5 weeks. So please enjoy your time, enjoy the people around you, and get some time off and have a great rest of June and an early start to July.